and we blithely go through life not caring, not feeling empathy. When, political folk go at each other, they're doing it from they're, actors. The best example was um, Dude and Dudette at the, for the Supreme Court thing. And I'm not talking about, Brent and the doctor, the folks on the committee. They're all hired guns and they're all hired by the same folk. Um, you know, throughout our planet, there are, it's not the left and the right. It's not the commies and the capitalists. Because there are no commies and there are no capitalists. We live in a world of oligarchs. We live in a world of, our gang and your gang. And it's not a comedy because you look at the war in Yemen, and there are close to 20 million people who are going to starve to death by Christmas, right? And that is being, Donnie went on the tube on 60 Minutes. I didn't see it, but I was listening to public radio. And public radio, it's as bad as Fox or MSNBC, or, I mean, it has its own, point of view, I would call it. But at least it goes on long enough where you can get the basic information. And then Donnie would go on and say, oh, this is bad that they did something to this, you know, newspaper guy, and if he was killed by them, I mean, the Saudis, we're going to have to punish them. Oh, but we can't, it's not, the $100 billion worth of weapons that's killing the Yemenis people, mom and dad and little baby Joe, not so much the Houthi fighters, and the war has to stop, but it's not going to, I mean, the United States is 100%. We pick the targets. We refuel the Saudi aircraft. We give them the aircraft. We give them the bombs. We give them everything to kill these people. And we do it across, I mean, the only thing, we're not shipping out TVs and sewing machines and washers and dryers like we did in the 50s. The only product that the United States makes buck on is weapons, and nasty weapons. Not just guns. But as I said, we are spiritual beings experiencing a political, physical, material life. And when people think that that's what's really it's all about, it's not. It's time for us to stand up. Here it is, 4 minutes into it, 10:45. We're going.
I think it's a very, very big motivator to respond properly.
Yeah. Well, let's switch gears here then and talk about the increasing tensions and questions around the disappearance and as Turkish officials are saying, the murder of journalist and dissident Jamal Khashoggi. Naftali Ben David, the president tweeting today that he just spoke to the King of Saudi Arabia and the King denies any knowledge whatsoever of whatever may have happened to Khashoggi, and that now the President Donald Trump, saying he's immediately sending Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to meet with the Saudi King. Your thoughts on that?
Well, it's a bit of a mixed message coming out of the White House, and whether that's by design or simply because that's how they are is a little bit hard to say. It's true, he did say that about Saudi Arabia. It reminded me a little bit of some of his comments about President Putin. He says that they denied very strongly. He said it could be some rogue actors. And in the case of the Russians, you may recall, he said it could be some 400-pound guy on a bed. I don't think there's a lot of other...
Yeah.
In a basement, yeah. I don't think there's a lot of other people suggesting it could be rogue killers unconnected to Saudi Arabia. So on the one hand, in the 60 Minutes interview, he talked about that there's going to be severe punishment if it turns out that the Saudis are behind it. On the other hand, he's taken the idea of canceling our arms deals with the Saudis off. He's just taken that off the table and has talked about how much he has a good relationship with them. But then he turns around and sends Pompeo and talks about getting to the bottom of it. And it's just, I think, in some ways a reflection of our fairly complex relationship with Saudi Arabia, where they're an authoritarian country without any question. On the other hand, we have a lot of commercial relations with them. We sort of count on them to be a stabilizing force in the middle. Thing I just want to say is President Trump tends to have a relationship with leaders. That's how he describes it. He'll
See, just what I'm talking about. Blah, 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 blah. But this all goes back to, I mean, our government, FDR met with the Saudi Arabian king during World War II. And this little partnership was hammered out then, you know? And, that guy had no authority to, have a government to do anything. No one voted him in, but FDR said, you're the guy in charge now. We'll back you up with weapons. And we had, more guns than anybody because we were just pumping them out. And you have to realize, the connection with Israel and Saudi Arabia. They are partners. And they were partners in 9/11. They were the showmen. I mean, the airplanes, if they even were, that flew into the World Trade Centers, were just the bait and switch because those buildings could never have been brought down without a controlled demolition. And that was the new Pearl Harbor. And don't believe anything I say. Do your own homework. Just Google, 9/11 truth, and a zillion little sites will pop up, and look at them, and yeah, a lot of them are probably talking through their hat, but there's so much information. I mean, it was never, ever. I used to be a fireman. Any fire happened, it was always investigated. Here's the biggest fire that caused the biggest brouhaha in our country, never got investigated. The 9/11 hearings in D.C. were not an investigation. They were a PR stunt, and they weren't going to happen, but the families of the people who died were so upset that they politically forced it. And study that. And, the architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, go see them. And, just check it out.